and I want each and every one of you to continue this partnership, to make this new mech, a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the Merlin. If you want the energy-based long-range punch and endurance of a Nighthawk, he can do it, and then some. If you want to reach out and say hello with reliable long-range missile volleys like a sling, he can do that too. If you want solid, reliable laser fire at moderate ranges, he has that covered. He also carries as much armor as those two combined, though, and brings a Zippo and a Sperry Browning along to dissuade infantry and for additional in-close protection. Rowan Avalar, niece to the president of the Outworlds Alliance and 10th in line for the throne, was a black sheep who wanted to be a Mechwarrior in a nation that revered aerospace pilots. As her academy graduation day had approached, her uncle placed a call to the Outworlds-based Mountain Wolf battlemech facility. Her parents wrote a check, and 15 months later she arrived on Galatia, the legendary mercenary Star, a naive 19-year-old piloting a Merlin battlemech down a dropship ramp. Most battlemechs in the Inner Sphere were centuries old, passed down from parent to child, and the facilities that produced new ones were running the same lines since the fall of the Star League in the 2700s. But the Merlin was new. The first battlemech production line fired up in more than a century, and Rowan's arrival caused a sensation. Fans of the Periphery Nations, rejoice, for I bring you good tidings and the tale of a generalist battlemech that has been embraced by many who understood its value. While the excitement was intense for the first entirely new Inner Sphere battlemech design for what felt like centuries, the Merlin was received with a muted reaction. As tends to happen, the generalist battlemechs lose the limelight to the specialized mechs, and the Merlin was really no exception. The first Merlins rolled off the assembly lines in 3010, and the producer Mountain Wolf Battlemechs sought to create a new, heavy frontline battlemech that could also tiptoe into other categories like fire support and close-range brawling if necessary. With simplicity and repair in mind, the Merlin's engineers used common parts in ways that were familiar to techs across the Inner Sphere and the Periphery. The final result was a 60-ton generalist battlemech that could fit into many roles, though excel in very few. And we just recently talked on the channel before about this concept, so to put it simply, the Merlin is a survivor. Built around a Heavy Star QAT-4 steel frame and a Pitban 240 Fusion engine, the name of the game here is reliability and simplicity. The early 3000s in the Inner Sphere were a time before endosteel and ferrofibrous were really a thing. With the succession wars, access to replacement parts and the know-how to make new parts were an extreme premium. You had to work with what you had on hand. The Merlin could hit a top speed of 65 km per hour, which is right in line with most heavy mechs at the time. The Pitban LFT-50 jump jets helped the mech to leap up to 130 meters, which is nice to see on a heavy generalist design. The Magistrix, Alpha, and Gamma communications and targeting and tracking systems were solid as well. The Merlin carried 18 standard heatsinks, which were put to work by the mech's weapon loadout. The 10.5 tons of Longenecker plastisteel armor provided 168 points of armor protection, which is good for a 60-tonner at the time. For comparison, the Dragon 1N had 10 tons of armor and the Quickdraw 4G just 8. The 26 armor on the center torso could take a beating before cracking with the available weaponry of the time. As with many Inner Sphere mechs of the period, and meeting the designer's goals for the Merlin, the weapons loadout for the 1A is a bit of an everything in the kitchen sink design. The primary weapon is a particle projection cannon located in the right torso. Backing it up at the longest range is an LRM-5 launcher, also in the right torso. At the shorter range, a pair of medium lasers, one in each arm, provided a little bit more oomph to the Merlin's attacks. Finally, at the range at which you'd wish your date had invested in some breath mints, a standard machine gun and flamer are nestled safely in the left torso. Because apparently the designers wanted to keep the ammunition for the LRM launcher and the machine gun close to their hearts, the single ton of ammunition for each weapon is stored in the center torso. When the first Merlins marched off the assembly line on Alpharats, there were orders from the major Inner Sphere houses, but not as many as Mountain Wolf had hoped. The militaries of the houses tended to have their own mechs, which fit that generalist spot and saved the cash for mech contracts on more specialized designs. Instead, orders started coming in from both mercenary units and periphery powers that identified the value in stretching their limited resources with a mech that could fill multiple roles in a changing environment. That sounds familiar. Where have we heard that before? Ah yes, check out the Vindicator video after this one if you haven't already. It also didn't help that the Hatchet Man was produced in 3023, which stole some of the Merlin's thunder as the latest and greatest in new battlemechs. When it had debuted in 3010, they called the Merlin 1A a modern marvel, an act of wizardry, a yeoman's mech for yeoman's work. It had been quite a departure from Mountain Wolf's reputation, insomuch as they still had a reputation for hyper-specialized machines, and instead was a well-rounded beast, built for reliability and ease of maintenance. The result was a heavy battlemech beloved by technicians and quartermasters on backworry periphery worlds more than by their Mechwarriors, an easily jury-rigged machine made of some of the most common and rugged weapons in the Inner Sphere. One of the earliest purchasers was a mercenary unit called the Wolverton Highlanders. They made quite a name for themselves as pirate hunters in the periphery near the border between House Merrick and Steiner. The Merlin's flexibility, durability, and ease of repair kept the unit running during long campaigns far from settled space and supply chains. The Merlin wouldn't see its first official variant for roughly 40 years, which is impressive even though there were of course countless field refits and Franken-Mech variants created during that time. The Merlin 1B would debut in 3053, and it is best described as a modest side grade. The mech is basically identical to the 1A except for that the machine gun and 1 ton of ammunition are removed to make weight available for another heatsink, bringing the total on the mech to 19. Though it does help with the mech's heat issues, especially while jump jetting, 1 heatsink isn't going to make or break you. Or maybe it will. Now in 3064, there was a field variant created by a mech technician named Porter Romero. Using his know-how, spare weaponry, and a salvaged Bulldog tank, he refit a Merlin into what is known as the Merlin 1B Porter. The PPC was ripped out of the right torso and replaced with a large laser. The LRM-5 and Flamer were swapped out for an SRM-4. 20 single heat sinks keep the mech cool, and the remaining tonnage is spent on additional armor. What Romero created was a short-range brawler that ran cool even with modest jump jet use. It's worth looking into if you're keen on using the Merlin from that time period and expect close combat. At only 909 battle value, it is a steal. With the 1C variant in 3068, the mech saw another modest upgrade. At this point, the machine gun was a distant memory, and now with the 1C, the 2 standard medium lasers were pulled in favor of replacing them with the extended range versions. With only 19 single heat sinks in 3068, the mech was beginning to show its age, and the heat from firing the PPC and both ER medium lasers was enough to push the mech right up to the red line on heat. Many owners and buyers of the Merlin really couldn't afford fancy XL engines and double heat sinks, so Mountain Wolf battlemechs just kept plugging away at making more of what was working. Of course, not every Merlin owner was bereft of resources. In 3075, the Sabinilis mining company based out of Sabinilis decided to upgrade their Merlins that they had on site with some pretty substantial technological upgrades. Starting with its bones, the internal structure was replaced with an endo-composite frame which saved weight in exchange for taking up more internal space on the battlemech. The standard fusion engine was replaced with a 240 Light, which also bought additional weight. The engine was then shielded with additional armor to keep the mech in the fight for longer. The single heat sinks were replaced with 14 double heat sinks, which were going to be needed for what was added later. The armor was increased to 11 tons, and the 4 jump jets were retained. The remaining weight was spent on a collection of eclectic weaponry. This included a bombast laser in the right torso, which is doing the bulk of the damage output, and a pair of medium variable speed pulse lasers. Each of the 3 weapons was encased in a laser insulator to keep their heat issues at bay. We're not going to get into the specifics on the bombast laser, but it can do up to 12 damage based upon how willing you are to hobble your to-hit rolls and accept the extra heat. It's not a weapon I'm very fond of because of its wonky rules that slow play. The VSPs are only marginally better, and the combination of both laser types on the same mech would significantly slow down your play. While it does reflect at least an attempt to upgrade the machine to new technology, sometimes a little bit can go a long way, and a lot can be way too much. The Merlin SX remains a very rare mech which is sometimes spotted hunting pirates out by the Filtveld Coalition. The Merlin 1D debuted in 3090, and it is a pleasure to see after some lackluster previous variants. It retains the standard PPC, which is a surprise in 3090, but the 2 medium lasers from the 1A are replaced with a pair of light PPCs. The LRM-5 is retained in the right torso and the Flamer in the left. Surprisingly, the Pew Pew returns in the Merlin with a heavy machine gun in the left torso. The jump jets are retained, and thankfully, finally, there are 13 double heatsinks added to the mech. The 4 primary weapons all reach out to at least 18 hexes, and the light PPCs are a nice upgrade from the medium lasers for the range alone. Though the mech is technically heat neutral while not jumping, most of the time you aren't using that flamer, so you're going to be running cool. If you're playing your games out to 3090, the Merlin 1D has my Mechfrog seal of approval. The possible 20 damage per turn is respectable, and the armor on it is still solid. It can be a zombie fight for quite a while with that standard engine. Our next to last official variant is the Merlin 1P. It is our Dark Age / IlClan era variant, and it was introduced in 3114. The 464 movement is retained with the original standard engine, and thankfully there are 13 double heatsinks. Much of the mech's internal space is taken up with a replacement of the standard armor with heavy ferrofibrous plating. For weaponry, the mech inexplicably retains the LRM-5 in the right torso and the flamer in the left torso. I don't know why, maybe it's just tradition. The right torso has the heavy-hitting large variable speed pulse laser, which can reach out to 15 hexes and do up to 11 damage at close range. Just 7 damage in the long range bracket. In the right and left arm, there are a couple of medium variable speed pulse lasers that can reach out to 9 hexes and do 5 damage, 9 damage at short range. While the accurate VSP lasers are an interesting gimmick weapon, I don't think you can build a mech around a single large VSP and call it strong. Under ideal conditions at close range, the Alpha Strike, including the Flamer, is a possible 31 damage. While not bad there, at medium range with the medium VSPs, the damage falls to a possible 23 plus however many LRMs from the LRM-5 manage to hit. At the long range medium VSP laser bracket, the possible damage is only 17 plus the LRMs. Personally, I'm not a fan of different sizes of VSP laser on the same mech because again, much like the SX variant, it slows down your turn significantly trying to figure out what damage you're doing at what range and with what to hit modifier. Does anyone need to slow down that phase in the BattleTech game? I don't think so. The Merlin 1P is perfectly serviceable if you're willing to put up with the weapons. I just would rather go with something more streamlined for gameplay reasons. The last of the official variants is the Merlin C. Our friends in the Raven Alliance deemed the Merlin worthy of receiving a clan technology upgrade in 3093. Leaving the standard fusion engine in place, this might be the first mech we have covered that didn't actually get an XL engine anywhere in the upgrade history. Good for them for identifying one of the mech's strongest assets. 18 clan double heatsinks were added to the mech, and it needed all of them. Additionally, the armor was upgraded to ferrolamellar, which provides another bit of protection to make the mech that much tougher. The 464 movement is retained, out of tradition at this point, but the weapons are all new. The primary weapon is definitely the clan ERPPC in the right torso, which hits like a truck at 15 damage all the way out to 23 hexes. In the right and left arms, medium improved heavy lasers can do 10 damage apiece out to 9 hexes. The fabled LRM-5 was upgraded to the Streak version because why not? And finally, a heavy machine gun and flamer finish off loadout in the left torso. The ammunition for the weapons is stored in the left torso, which has case, and both arms are also protected by case, as those improved heavy lasers can and do explode. With 36 heat dissipation per turn, the mech runs quite cool even when firing all of its weaponry and jumping. Doing so will only net you about +2 heat for that turn. If you lay off the flamer or the Streak LRM-5, you're at net 0. The Merlin C is as close to an ideal version of the mech as possible, and that's thanks to the clan weaponry, heatsinks, and ferrolamellar armor. I'm not sure if it's fair to designate it as my favorite of the official variants because of this, so I'll say it's right up there with the Merlin 1D. Now let's see what we can get out of a Mechfrog variant. I think we're going to stick with the Inner Sphere technology this time, as the Merlin is still quite popular with the periphery nations and mercs, so we want to keep the prices down. I upgraded to the Inner Sphere Indo-Steel to buy some weight for later. 15 double heatsinks will keep the mech running reasonably cool, and the 464 movement is retained. The armor remains at 10.5 tons of standard plate. For weapons, as much as I wanted to leave the LRM-5 out of tradition, it had to go along with all the other weapons. In the right torso, I installed a heavy PPC, which can pack that 15 damage wallop out to 18 hexes. Matching the range profile, I added 2 light PPCs, 1 to each arm, which will back it up with a consistent 5 damage per turn. Finally, for close range sparring with those deliciously flammable infantry, a pair of medium pulse lasers in the left torso finish off the loadout. In the mid-range, that's a possible 25 damage, and at close range it goes up to 37. It remains a mech that is hard to take down thanks to its standard engine, and it can hit back the whole time using its weapon distribution across the battlemech. I think the Merlin 1F fits the theme of a low-cost but durable mech, which might be easy to punch, but it's hard to kill. If you give it a try, let me know how it goes. As always, there's a Dropbox link in the video comments that has the record sheet. Overall, I appreciate the Merlin for what it is. At the time when there hadn't been a brand new battlemech produced in hundreds of years, Mountain Wolf battlemechs took a big chance and ended up creating a mech that would end up being tremendously useful across the periphery for the next century. The fact that they're still producing the original variants with very few changes is a testament to the mech's versatility and the need for low-cost battlemechs. The CGL redesign is great, and it bulks the mech out a bit, which I think the original art was lacking. I'm looking forward to seeing this one in plastic mini form someday in the future. Do you have any tabletop experience with the Merlin? Do you run a periphery force that features it? I know there are a few Magistracy of Canopus fans out there in the audience. Big thank you for hanging out today. If you felt it was worthwhile, please let YouTube know by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Another free way to support the channel is to share this video with one other person who might enjoy it. That way the community we're building can keep growing, and that's good for BattleTech. If you want to take the extra step to become a YouTube channel member, that goes a long way, as ad revenue is likely much less than you might imagine. Every little bit helps keep this nonsense flowing. It's been a pleasure, and until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.